What is up, everyone? It is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Can you all believe that March is already over? It's into April now. 2022 is flying by so fast. But in today's video, we are going to go through and talk about all of the books that I read in March. March was a really good reading month. I read a lot of books, so let's just hop right into it. So the first book I read in March was Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. This is Colleen Hoover's latest book, and it's about a young woman who just got released from prison after serving time for driving under the influence that ended up killing her then boyfriend. While in prison, she discovers that she is pregnant with her late boyfriend's child, so she gives birth but then loses custody, and the boyfriend's parents are raising the child. So 5 years later, this woman goes back to the town where her daughter is growing up and wants to get back into her daughter's life, but the boyfriend's parents, friends, family of the late boyfriend still have a lot of anger, resentment towards her because of driving under the influence and the events that killed their son. So I really liked this novel. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I feel like I really enjoy reading these kinds of relationship books that also delve a lot into like real life topics and real life events. So everything isn't always like rainbows and butterflies, but there is a lot of real life elements intertwined within it. And I just found this book so sad and tragic, and I was just crying so much throughout. It was an emotional roller coaster. Next up, we have Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This story follows a supposed hostage situation bank robber whose bank robbing plan fails, and then they hold this group of people hostage who are all at an apartment open house just viewing the apartment. And then you get the different perspectives of the police investigating, the people at the open house, all of their backstory, this supposed bank robber hostage person's backstory, and they're all like low-key intertwined. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. It's a good book, but I guess it wasn't necessarily my favorite out of like these books that I read in March. I don't know. I feel like maybe I prefer more like action or events that are happening in the book, but this story goes a lot into the different backstories of all of the characters. How did they end up at this open house? Where did the bank robber hostage person go? Which it does answer that question, and it is heartwarming at the end when you figure out the entire story, but I just felt like it sort of dragged on a little bit too long. Next up, we've got Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I read another Blake Crouch novel in a previous reading video, so I was like, okay, let's try another. So this book is sci-fi. It is sort of about like the multiverse. So there is this machine that can basically get you into one of the many different timelines that are happening right now. So we might be in this timeline, but you could get into a different timeline. So in the beginning, the main character gets kidnapped and sent to a different timeline, and he really wants to find his way back home. And then the novel follows that. Can he figure out the multiverse? Can he find his way back home? What happens when he gets back home? All of that. So I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It's an interesting read. Science fiction is always so fascinating. What can people come up with? So the multiverse was really interesting. I thought the middle of the book was sort of slow when they're traveling to different timelines, trying to find their way back home. You like spend so much time just in random timelines, and I get it. You can't just magically pick the right timeline on your first try, but I was like, okay, let's get on with it. Let's get back to the timeline we want to get back to and see if he can get back to his family or not. Next up, we've got Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. In my February reading wrap-up, I read Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, so I thought let me pick up this other popular Taylor Jenkins Reid book in Malibu Rising. So this novel follows actually one of the 7 husbands from the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo book, Mick Riva, and Mick Riva's family, his children, his wife, and all of their backstories. So I liked it. I thought it was a cute, fun story. I am giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I guess it's interesting because you are leading up to this party at the end of the story. So it's all a lot of like background, family building, stuff like that. So some parts can be a little bit slow, but I feel like you get invested into this family enough that you want to learn about their histories and what is up with them. So if you like stories like that, then definitely check this out. But I would definitely say there's not like a ton of mind-boggling, insane drama. Next, we've got Survive the Night by Riley Sager. So I read Final Girls by Riley Sager and another reading wrap-up, liked it, similar to Blake Crouch. Let me check out another Riley Sager novel. This novel follows a college student who is leaving school because her roommate, her best friend, was just murdered by the campus killer who has now killed 3 people over the span of a couple of years. So the main character, she's going home, she wants to leave campus, she maybe wants to drop out of school, and so she goes to a ride share board at her college and gets a ride home from a stranger, a supposed other student. And then the book basically follows this entire ride home. Who is this person that offered her the ride? Is he sketchy? Is he a murderer? And then going through, will she survive the night or not? So this was an interesting, fast-paced thriller. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I felt like the twist of like who is the bad guy really paralleled Final Girls by Riley Sager. Like it's the same type of person that was bad in that book that is also bad in this book. So if you're into that kind of like actiony thriller books, who's the bad guy, who's the murderer, then definitely check this out. Next up for books that I read in March is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This book follows a 10-year college reunion where 10 years ago in this friend group's senior year of college, one of the girls in their friend group was murdered. The murder went unsolved, but her then boyfriend was basically blamed for the murder. He's no longer a part of the friend group because of it, but the police didn't have enough evidence against the boyfriend, so there was never a convicted murderer or anything like that. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. It was very, very fascinating, a murder mystery thriller. I really enjoyed it. Although I would definitely say I feel like the police could have for sure solved the murder back in the day 10 years ago if they literally just asked this friend group different questions. But I like this book because it's different. There's no like real good guys in the friend group. All of the friends' actions that night sort of contributed or led to the other friend getting killed. And this friend group is like high-key toxic. All of them are like insecure against others in the group. They're all cheating on their partners with other friends in the group. They're trying to sabotage their other friends. Like, you should not be friends with these people if you all are like doing these bad things to one another. So I just thought the book was different. Usually you have clear good people, bad people, but this book, everyone is sort of like different levels of bad. As you can see, I got my hair done between the first part and this part. Usually I have to film these book videos in multiple sections because like the books that I'm reading, they're due at the library and I have to return them before the month ends. So a little change in hair here. Getting back into it, the next book that I read in March was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. So I feel like this book is very popular on Book Talk, BookTube, and it's that classic enemies to lovers trope. Basically, the twin sister of the main character, she just got married, except everyone in the wedding party gets food poisoning besides the main character and then the husband's brother. So the main character and the brother, they were enemies, they don't really like each other, but they're forced to go on the sister's honeymoon instead of the sister and her husband. So they go on this trip not really liking each other, but then they start to like each other, all of that jazz. I would give this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I don't know, maybe I'm just not a fan of like romance books. I feel like for romance books, I sort of want it to have some other aspect to it. Like like a romance thriller or a romance mystery, but just a pure romance book, I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm such a big fan of. But I did like in this romance book, it has some subplots that isn't just romance, so it has some subplots with the sister and her new husband, as well as when they go on this fake honeymoon, they meet people from their real life. So I thought those like mini subplot side quests were fun and interesting. And I don't know, but why in every romance book they go to do paintball as like a date? They do paintball in this book. In the Hating Game, they do paintball as well. I'm like, do people really do paintball that much? I'm not sure. And last up, for physical books that I read in the month of March, we have Crying in Hmart by Michelle Zauner. So this is a memoir talking about Michelle's life, her upbringing, and then it really revolves around the death of her mother and basically the influence that her mother has had on her life and their relationship throughout their lives. I would give this a 5 out of 5 stars. It was truly heartbreaking. So Michelle's mother passes away from cancer, and it really delves into that mother and daughter relationship, how in high school Michelle didn't really have a good relationship with her mother, and then like by the time that they're talking again and stuff like that, it's too late because of the cancer diagnosis. It's such an incredibly sad, powerful read of that family dynamic and relationship. And then finally going into some audiobooks. I'm not really going to rate these audiobooks like I was giving the stars to the regular books, because I feel like for audiobooks I'm like doing other things while listening versus a physical book. My complete attention is to that book. I am reading it. I'm not like doing other things while listening. So first up for audiobooks, I listened to Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This novel follows a 36-year-old Japanese woman who works in a convenience store. And being 36 and working in a convenience store, she gets heavily judged by friends, family, strangers, asking her what she wants to do in her life. Why is she still working at this convenience store? Doesn't she want to do more things than just work there? Similarly, she's not dating, she's not married, so she's also judged on that front. 36, why aren't you married? Why aren't you dating? That kind of thing. So I would recommend Convenience Store Woman for a read or a listen. It really makes you think about like the pressure to conform into what is regular society in terms of what your career is, what your job is, and your relationship status. Really makes you think about like society and societal norms. The next audiobook I listened to was Invisible Women: Data Bias in a World Designed for Men by Caroline Criado Perez. And so this book is a researched book full of research and stats. I feel like for these kinds of more like educational books, I would prefer listening to them as an audiobook versus reading them, because I feel like reading them on paper really reminds me of like school books that you'd have to read. But Invisible Women, it goes into different things in the world, how there's a data gap in a lot of like products that we use, different things like designing cities, how a lot of tests are done on men, and it leaves out the women's view and role in designing these products, streets, cities, things like that. So I thought this book was interesting. It definitely makes you think about some things in your everyday life that you maybe wouldn't have thought about prior, because you really don't think about how is this designed? Could it be better in a certain way? Is this being discriminatory? And finally, for the 12th book that I read this month, Laziness Does Not Exist by Devin Price. This book talks about laziness and how it does not really exist, but how in today's society we are all accustomed to do that work hard, play hard, grind culture. If you take a break, you are lazy. So this is another one of those researched books. It has a lot of data in it and stats, and some parts in it were relatable about the grind culture, always having to work, always having to do the next thing, never letting yourself take a breath or take a break. But other parts of the book I felt like sort of started to get repetitive, sort of just repeating the same exact kinds of things over and over again. So those were the 12 books that I read in the month of March. If you have any book recommendations, definitely leave a comment down below because I am always looking for new things to read. And if you've read any of these books, also leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Did you like them? Did you dislike them? So yeah, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a big thumbs up to help me out with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos from me. Thank you all again, and I will see you all next time.